So here we are. We're going to start now our 12th episode. We've been going through all these references to this title Muhammad, and we found an enormous amount of other names that are odd that we talked about and that are in the Quran. We're going to come up now with another name, and this I understand is huge. Mel, who's over here, has gone ahead and put it up on his site. And what you've broken all records, haven't you, with what you're going to introduce here? Over
Yeah,
6,000
this
views already on your site, which is huge for you. And we want to see why this is so huge. Now, I have not seen what he's going to tell me. I have not heard. So, like you, this is going to be the first time I'm hearing it. I'm writing notes as we go because I want to be surprised by what he's come up with. I want to see why everybody is jumping to this video, especially this video. And it has something to do with the name Aziz. Now, that's all I'm going to say because I'm going to give it over to you, Mel. Let's see what you have to say and what you're going to tell us.
so if people have been following the series so far, they would understand that the argument that I've been making is that Islam is essentially a messianic religion, and it has been referring to the Messiah and it's been referring to Muhammad. But the name that we're going to see today, which is straight out of the Quran, is actually another messianic title, which confirms it's just further evidence for the argument that actually what we're looking at is a messianic religion and it is very different from what we think it is today.
Okay,
So without
real quickly, what do you mean by messianic?
well, the idea that the people who were associated with the beginnings of Islam were expecting a Messiah to come along.
All right.
That's actually what it's all about. It's not about a prophet as such. It was actually about a Messiah. And so obviously there's two groups of people that were waiting on a Messiah. The Christians are obviously waiting for Jesus to return, but Jews were expecting the Messiah to come for the first time.
Yeah.
So they haven't, from their point of view, they haven't had the Messiah yet. At least
Okay.
some Jews, you know. So we're looking at another synonym for Muhammad and Messiah in the Quran, which is Aziz. All right. And remember how we said in earlier videos that Muhammad meant beloved, lovely, the praised one, etc. Well, it turns out there is another word in the Quran that actually means that as well, which is Aziz. The only issue is that it's hidden because of a missing diacritical mark in the current version of the Quran. And that's Aziz. Now, to get back to Aziz, we have to recognize that there are two deceptions going on. First one is a false translation. So if you look at this here from Surah 9:30, you can see in the Arabic that Uzair is there in the Arabic currently. But if we see the translation, this is where the deception comes in. They have falsely translated it from Uzair to Ezra, which are different names. And they also make the claim that the Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah, which is not true. Did Jews ever hold to the belief that Ezra was the son of God? Well, if you go on to any forum, this is one example of a Jewish forum that I looked at, and they asked the question, and they essentially all came back and said, no, there's no record of any such thing, you know, so this is not nonsense. So the short answer amongst Jews is simply no, the Quranic claim is wrong and proves the Quran is false. But the question is, what lies behind it? Do you want to come in on this, Jay, before I continue?
No, but this is a mistake that we've heard many years about Ezra. They're always saying you need to go find Ezra, and we've always I had no idea where you're going to go with this because this is going to kill two birds with one stone. Because we have always had a blockage is to know where to go with this Ezra claim that the Quran's making as a son of God. When we now know that looks like what you're going to tell me is this we've been going up the wrong track. We've been going the wrong route. So I'm all ears. Let's see where you go with it. I'm going to see how you're going to answer that question.
Okay. So deception number 2 is hide a word in plain sight by losing a diacritical mark. Now, this deception could be intentional or it could be accidental. But if we were to trust the Islamic tradition that says that everything was preserved through the oral tradition, none of this should have happened if they all know exactly what the words in the Quran are through the oral tradition. So this should not be happened, but it has happened. So Can you spot the difference, Jay, between these two words?
Well, yes, there is a dot of well, but what should be Azir. It's now Aziz. There is a dot above the last letter on the left, and that should not be there.
Ex- exactly. Now, the word as it stands today in the Quran, if you look at the Hafs Quran, you have Uzair, but actually, if you put a dot above what is the Ra now, it becomes Aziz, totally different word. Now, this is from AJ Juice's paper, his recent paper called Iran's Poison Arrows. And he says in Arabic, Uzair is, as you can see there, Uzair as it's spelt in Arabic. But if it was marked incorrectly, now he amusingly spelt incorrectly wrong to make a point. We can recognize the word incorrectly there, even though it's spelled very incorrectly. He says it can read Aziz if you put that dot above it. Now, interestingly, it means beloved, holy, or praised, which is a familiar term used in context in the appearance of the messianic Mahmed. So we've seen this already. When we looked at Mahmed and what it means, these are the meanings that is connected with Mahmed. Now, it should be pointed out, Aziz also has other meanings as well, like strong, but it does carry that meaning, and, beloved, holy, praised one, etc. And so therefore, it is another messianic title. It is one that's referring to the Messiah. Now, what's also interesting is there was a 6th century inscription in Yemen where it has the word Mahmed, the praised one. Okay, so it has a similar meaning to that, Aziz. So you could wipe out the word Aziz and replace it with Mahmed. It would essentially mean the same thing. Now, so if we go back to that verse 930, we can see it says, the Jews say Aziz is the son of Allah, while the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. You can see now that it actually makes an awful lot more sense. You've got two alternative messianic titles, Aziz and Messiah. So all it's saying there is the Jews are using one particular title, Aziz, and the Christians are using the word Messiah. So it's kind of like this. You say tomato, I say tomato. The Jews say Aziz is the son of Allah, while the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. Aziz has the equivalent meaning to Mahmed and to Messiah. Aziz and Mahmed are interchangeable words. Jews say the word Aziz or Mahmed when they mean Messiah, whereas Christians use the word Messiah typically. This might indicate that according to the Quran, that the Mahmed movement is principally Jewish and not Christian. This doesn't preclude the possibility of cultural appropriation of the word Mahmed and linking it with the crosses found on coins in the 7th century. So what you have in the Quran is a suggestion that the word Aziz is a Jewish term for the Messiah that they're using. But we also see that the leaders were putting Mahmed on the coins as well. And these very likely were Christians because of the crosses. So there's kind of there's a definite messianic, message there in that passage. Now, the problem with all of that is this is kind of just using a bit of intuition. We're just recognizing that if we just put a dot over the word, we see it becomes Aziz, and it actually makes more sense now. So the question is, can we prove that Aziz was the original word and not Uzair or even Ezra? Now, luckily for us, we did get evidence in an early manuscript, and I got a message from Odin Lafontaine. He said, I've just reviewed manuscript Wettstein to 1913, one of the oldest and most complete manuscripts containing approximately 85% of the Quran. He says its dating is challenging due to extensive rewriting. You might be familiar with it. It's an invaluable resource that offers insights into the Quran's development. The manuscript includes very old folios, potentially from the late 7th century, based on the calligraphy style, and others written later resembling the Kufic script. Diacritical marks are inconsistently applied, often missing, with some added later, similarly for the vocalization marks. I think a key thing here, because I can sort of anticipate what the pushback might be on this, I think it's more explainable if dots are left out where the word is obvious. But what is not explainable if the word is meant to be user and someone goes and intentionally puts a dot above the word? That doesn't make sense, especially if user was the intended word. I can certainly allow for people forgetting to put a dot above a word, but what I can't understand is someone intentionally putting a letter where it shouldn't be. But with that out of the way, um, he mentions that this manuscript can be found at this location. And here's a little bit more information about it. But let's go and have a look at the manuscript, the folio. And if we zoom in, then we can see that there's a dot there. So if you look, the little yellow rectangle, there's a red dot to the left of it. And just to the right of that, you'll see a dot. And that's the part that gives you the Z letter. So you have a Z's. There's a gap between the two parts of the word, but it actually reads as Z's. Do you want to come back on that, Jay?
No, this is good. So what you're saying basically here is if this is now, I would be a little careful about dating it to late seventh century. This is a
Yeah,
much
yeah.
script. The fact that it has so many diacritical marks, this would probably make it even late eighth century. This would be post Topkapi. The Topkapi is starting to introduce the red dots, and that's mid eighth century. I would post this late eighth century. So I wouldn't agree with Odon like on that. I'm not sure where Odon is even coming up with that date. Nonetheless, this is eighth century, so it's one of the earliest manuscripts. What we're more interested in, the red dots are probably later. This is not a red dot we're looking at, though. Notice these are part of the original script. They're black dots. Now
Yeah.
remember, this took a while for the dots to be canonized. There you're looking at some of the original dots there. So just be careful about the red dots. People think that's all we're looking at. No, we're looking at the black dots above the two R's. When you have a dot above the R, the R sound makes it a Z sound. So that's why it's now, though that would be a Z's there.
And you know, Jay, just to follow up what you said, if this is mid 8th century or even late 8th century, that is even more damaging because it means that there's a definite use of Aziz, um, for a good chunk of time before it got removed, and probably it got removed precisely because the the story had changed. They're gone from a messianic movement to one where they have a prophet in a fantastical place called Mecca in the middle of nowhere, where there's no water, and but yet there's supposed to be this large community, all familiar with Syriac texts and so forth.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
that's a whole
obviously
nother discussion. And that's
it is.
especially you and I have had, and that is that almost even this manuscript, these manuscripts would have been under the control of the Ottomans from the late 13th century, early 14th century on. So they would have had access to all of these. They could have expunged that dot. The fact that that's not expunged suggests clearly that that was the way it was intended. What we need to do is we need to go to the other manuscripts, the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, anyone that has chapter 9, verse 30, and see if that dot is there. I would suggest it's not because that's pre-dotting. We need to then look at the later ones, like the ones that like Tübingen, which comes later, those manuscripts where dotting is now being formed, and see if they have the dot above the R, making it a Z.
Yeah, I think the important thing is, there was an inconsistency in the application of dots. I suppose the key thing is which would have come first in terms of what was the intentional word to begin with. I would suggest that um, Uzer makes no sense. A sees in the context makes more sense. So that was the word that was intended. And if the dot got lost over time, that's probably true error, scribal error,
Which happens
or
all the time. We have scribal
yeah,
errors in most of the manuscript. Some of them are
yeah,
intentional, some of them are accidental.
yeah. But this would actually have a theological effect because it's essentially they're losing the real meaning of that sentence because it is a double messianic title it's been referred to, and with
Absolutely.
that meaning lost, it's changing the whole sense of the meaning of the sentence. So that's a little bit more on the ze and the ra there. Let me just go on to next part. Um, It mentions there that the "ya" lacks the two dots underneath. That's part of that inconsistency, but it's unmistakably a "ya," as the other "ya" on the page also lacks those points beneath them. And I want to just finish by thanking Odin for helping us with that, with all of that information. So thank you, Odin, and I'll come back to you.
I can see why now. Now that makes I've written a whole page of notes here on this. This is going to be fun to see how the Muslims react to this, because they have always claimed that we have got it wrong with Ezra, and we're putting Ezra as another son of God. When in reality, no, it's not Ezra, it's not Uzair, it's Aziz, which is the very same title we're finding for Muhammad, which is in the Old Testament 11 times, which was started by the Ugaritic writing for the praised one, altogether lovely, even the Messiah. So it's this idea that the Aziz is the Messiah. Here's something I want you to go one step further then, because in chapter 12 of the Quran, when Joseph is captured in captivity, notice what happens to him. Who is the one that's responsible for him? The great Aziz, the very same word. Now we need to go back to
Yeah,
chapter 12 and see how that is dotted, because I would suggest that if you look at if I'm not talking about modern day it's Aziz, but they don't realize what that is. So that's another one. What's Aziz doing in chapter 12 then? Did they get that confused? And
yeah.
what is the original writing for that word in chapter 12 of the story of Joseph? Because the messianic figure, there's Aziz, who is the leader there in Egypt. What's he doing as the messianic figure in Egypt? Obviously, it looks like they got that confused too. So coming and going, not just with chapter 9, I would suggest this is really going to hammer and hang chapter 12 as well, the story of Joseph. Good
Absolutely.
spot.
Yeah, it has huge repercussions.
You've probably some of you have heard this already on Mel's channel. This is the first time you're hearing it here. I'm sure it's going to be on Sarah International. Mel, you're going to have to go there and introduce it there as well. So now you will have heard it 3 times. But let's see how you respond to this. If this is so, if this is the Aziz that we're looking for, if this is the word that also parallels Mahmed, which is both of which are referring to messianic title. It could be a Jewish messianic title, or it could be a Christian, a second coming of Jesus a second time. Both both are correct. And if you're borrowing, remember, the Quran is borrowing everything. Everything that it has is borrowed from other sources. And those sources are all up in the seminaries, up in places like Damascus and in Kufa and in Petra, as we're going to find with the Jewish authority. This would make sense that these words, not only these ideas are being borrowed as well, the words are being borrowed as well. And whether it's a Jewish source for Aziz, whether it's a Christian source for the second coming of Christ, in both cases, this is not referring to Muhammad, the man that was way down in the south, that was way down in the Hijaz.
No.
It looks like this is referring to Jesus, or the Messiah that the Jews are still waiting for now. Good stuff. Great stuff. Lovely, lovely. This is going to be something. What are we going to do next?
Okay, so what we're going to look at next is we're going to look at evidence for a chain of Mohammeds. And for that, we're going to look at St. John of Damascus and some Chinese sources. So that's going
Wow.
to be
Okay.
a
So
bit of a reveal.
good stuff. We're going back to Damascus, and we're going all the way over to China, way over in the Far East. Good stuff. Okay. Until next time, folks, do your comments to write down below us. Put your comments there. Let's see where your comeback is on this. This is Jay and my good friend Mel, over and out.